How long can a promise truly last? A month? A year? A lifetime? We often make promises in moments of great passion, never truly knowing the weight they will carry through the years. But what if you held onto a single promise, a single memory, for 50 years? What if your entire life became a testament to a love that was met with nothing but an ocean of silence? Today, I want to share a story that I found by chance, hidden from the world in the false bottom of a salt-stained sea chest. It's a love story that begins in the hopeful, grey streets of post-war London between two young dreamers, Arthur and Clara. It begins with a plan for a new life and a whispered promise: wait for my signal. But that signal never came. What followed was half a century of waiting. Through these letters, we will witness one woman's unwavering devotion as she writes to a ghost, her hope a flickering candle against the winds of time. But this is only half of the story. Because, continents away, a man was living a life of secrets, haunted by the one choice that cost him everything. This is not just a story of love and loss. It's a profound mystery about the nature of shame, the weight of regret, and the incredible, sometimes devastating, power of hope. As you listen, I want to invite you to be part of this discovery. Ask yourself, was Clara's 50-year vigil a beautiful act of faith, or the tragic squandering of a life? And was Arthur's silence an act of cowardice, or a misguided attempt to protect the woman he loved? There are no easy answers here, and I truly want to know what you think. Please, share your perspective in the comments below. Your thoughts are a vital part of bringing this story to life. If you believe that some voices deserve to be heard, no matter how long they have been silent, then please consider subscribing to the channel. We are a community of story keepers, and we would be honored to have you with us. And now, let's open the chest and listen to the echo of a promise. This is the story of Arthur and Clara, and the truth that arrived one lifetime too late. There's a unique kind of magic to a seaside flea market, especially one in Brighton on a misty Saturday morning. The air hangs thick with the scent of salt, frying donuts, and the sweet decay of forgotten things. It's a symphony of chaos, the calls of vendors, the screech of gulls, the low hum of treasure hunters sifting through the debris of other people's lives. It was on such a morning that I found it. Tucked away behind a stack of faded nautical maps and a box of rusted tools was a small sea chest. It wasn't grand. It was humble, made of dark, weathered wood, bound with tarnished brass straps, and scarred by what must have been decades of travel and neglect. It felt less like a piece of furniture and more like a silent witness. The vendor, a man with a face as weathered as the chest itself, only shrugged when I asked about its origins. Came from a house clearance up the coast. Old woman passed away. That's all I know. The price was negligible, and the feeling it gave me was not. It felt heavy with secrets. I paid the man, and with some effort, carried the chest back to my car, my mind already racing with the stories it might hold. Back home, the chest sat in the middle of my living room, commanding the space with its quiet presence. I cleaned the years of dust from its surface and carefully worked the rusty latch open. The inside smelled of cedar and the faint, lingering aroma of the ocean. The contents were, at first, predictably nautical: a bundle of yellowed sea charts of the English Channel, a small book on tying knots, a brass compass that no longer pointed north. It was charming, but not the deep history I had imagined. I felt a pang of disappointment. Perhaps it was just a simple sailor's box after all. But as I lifted the last of the charts, my fingers brushed against an unnatural seam in the wooden bottom. My heart quickened. It was perfectly fitted, almost invisible, but it was there. Using the edge of a letter opener, I gently pried it up. The false bottom lifted with a soft groan, revealing a shallow, hidden compartment. And inside, nestled on a bed of faded velvet, was a single, neatly tied bundle of letters. They were bound together with a pale blue silk ribbon, now frayed and discolored with age. The stack was thick, perhaps 50 or 60 envelopes in total. The paper was brittle, ranging in color from cream to a deep, tea-stained brown. Two distinct sets of handwriting graced the envelopes. One was a bold, masculine script, the ink flowing with confidence and urgency. The other was a more delicate, precise hand, elegant and measured. I carefully untied the ribbon, its fibers disintegrating slightly under my touch. The first letter I picked up was from him. The postmark was faint, but I could just make out the details: London, March 1947. I opened it carefully, the paper crackling in protest. "My dearest Clara," it began. "Another grey day dawns over this city, and honestly, if it weren't for the thought of seeing your face this evening, I think the endless soot and fog might swallow me whole. The factory was a cacophony of noise and metal today, and I swear, I'm beginning to think in the rhythm of the machinery. It's a hollow sound, a sound of survival, not of living. But then I think of you, and the world fills with color again. I think of the small smile you try to hide when I tell a terrible joke, the way your eyes light up when you talk about the dresses you're designing. You are the architect of all my best daydreams. Clara, my love, I cannot bear this life for us much longer. We are more than this. We are more than rationed books, leaky ceilings, and the ghost of the war that still haunts every street corner. I was born for sunshine, and you were born to be adorned in it. I have been thinking, scheming really. There is a way out of this, a path to the life we whisper about in the dark. A place with endless blue skies and a sea the color of your eyes. It will require a bit of courage, a bit of risk, but I promise you, it will be worth it. Don't you worry your beautiful mind. Just trust me. I am making plans for us. Soon, my love. Sooner than you think. The letter was signed simply, Forever yours, Arthur. I folded the page back along its weary creases, my mind painting a picture of this young man, Arthur. He was a dreamer, a romantic, trapped in the grim reality of a post-war world. His love for Clara was a tangible thing, a lifeline in a sea of grey. But as I sat there in the silence of my room, the weight of the chest and its hidden secrets felt heavier than ever. I could feel the hope radiating from that first letter, but I also sensed the deep, dark chasm of the 50 years that followed. This was only the beginning, and I had a terrible feeling that the path Arthur was planning to take would lead them somewhere far from the sun. The second envelope I pulled from the stack was her reply. The paper was finer, a delicate cream color, and it held the faintest scent of lavender, a ghost of a fragrance that had miraculously survived the decades. Clara's handwriting was a stark contrast to Arthur's passionate scrawl. It was graceful, each letter formed with an artist's precision. It was the handwriting of someone thoughtful, someone who weighed her words carefully. The date was just 3 days after Arthur's letter. My dearest Arthur, she wrote. Your letter arrived this morning, and I have been carrying it with me all day, a secret warmth tucked into my pocket. I read it on my lunch break, and for a moment, the noisy workshop with its endless chatter and the drone of the sewing machines simply faded away. All I could see were the blue skies you described, and all I could feel was the truth of your words. You are my color in this city, just as I seem to be yours. Please, never think your jokes are terrible. They are my favorite kind of foolishness. But my love, when you speak of schemes and risks, my heart flutters with something other than joy. It flutters with fear. What more do we need than what we have right now? We have the walks in the park, even if the grass is still patchy. We have our small corner table at the pub, and we have the future we build with every shared look and every whispered promise. You are my great adventure, Arthur. I need no other. This life is hard, I know, but we are facing it together. That is all the treasure I will ever require. Please, my darling, be careful. Your ambition is one of the 1,000 things I love about you, but your safety is my entire world. Her letter was filled with a gentle, pleading love. She was his anchor, trying to ground his high-flying dreams in the safe harbor of their shared affection. Reading her words, I could picture her so clearly, a young woman with nimble fingers and a steady heart, her quiet strength a perfect balance to his restless energy. The next few letters continued in this vein, a dance of dreams and caution. Then, about a month later, the tone shifted. Arthur's next letter was written on expensive-looking paper, his script hurried, almost vibrating with excitement. Clara, my star, you will not believe the turn our fortunes have taken. I have made the acquaintance of a man, a Mr. Silas, a true gentleman of commerce with interests across the continent. He sees potential in me, Clara. He says I have a fire that London has tried its best to extinguish. We are embarking on a venture together. It's all perfectly legitimate, mind you, just clever. He appreciates a man who is willing to take a calculated risk. I know you worry, but this is it. This is the door we've been waiting for. Tucked inside that very envelope, I found it. A small, silver locket, shaped like a heart. It was tarnished and dull now, but it must have once been brilliant. I held it in my palm. It was cool to the touch. A small hinge opened to reveal 2 tiny frames, both empty. I could feel the story attached to it, the weight of the moment it was given. Clara's response, dated a week later, was telling. I could feel her conflict, her love warring with her intuition. My Arthur, the locket is the most beautiful thing I have ever seen. I gasped when I opened the box. But it must have cost a fortune. It frightens me. This Mr. Silas. I do not know him. Men who promise the world often end up taking it instead. Is this venture truly safe? Your letters have become so full of secrets lately. I would rather wear rags and have you by my side than be draped in jewels and be left wondering where you are. Tell me you will abandon this if it is even the slightest bit dangerous. Promise me, Arthur. But he never did. The final letter in this early chapter of their lives was from him. It was short, barely a dozen lines scrawled on a torn piece of paper, the ink slightly smeared as if written in a tremendous hurry. It was not sent in an envelope, but seemed to have been folded and passed by hand. My love, the time has come. I am leaving tonight for a few days. Silas has arranged everything. When I return, it will be with the keys to our new life. This is the final step. Do not worry. Do not try to find me. Just wait for my signal. I will write the moment I can. When you next hear from me, we will be free. Think of me. I love you more than words can say. Forever yours, Arthur. And then, nothing. The next letter in the pile was from Clara, dated 3 weeks later. And the one after that, 2 months later. The confident, masculine script of Arthur vanished entirely. I sat there, the weight of that final, breathless note in my hand. He had asked her to wait. He had promised a new life. As I looked at the large, remaining stack of letters, all penned in Clara's elegant, hopeful, and increasingly desperate hand, I realized I was about to witness just how long a heart could hold onto a promise. I was about to read the story of a 50-year silence. Arthur's abrupt departure left a vacuum, a sudden and unnerving silence that, as I would soon learn, would stretch across a lifetime. The rest of the letters in the sea chest, save for one, were all from Clara. They were a testament to a hope so stubborn it bordered on the divine. Her first letter after his disappearance is dated 3 weeks after his hurried note. It's written with a hopeful tremor, a clear effort to quell the anxiety that must have been consuming her. My dearest Arthur, it begins, her script as neat as ever. It has been the longest 3 weeks of my life. Every footstep on the stairs makes my heart leap, and every knock at the door sends me rushing, hoping it is a message from you. I hope your journey was safe, and that this venture, whatever it may be, has been a success. London is just as grey as you left it, perhaps even more so without you here to make it shine. I went to the pub last night, just for a little while. I saved your seat, but it felt wrong to be there alone. I am trying to be patient, as you asked. I am trying to trust. I am holding on to your promise with both hands. Please write soon. Just a single word to let me know you are well would be a balm to my soul. As the narrator, as the stranger piecing together this mosaic of a life, I can see the cracks already forming in her composure. There was no reply. A month later, another letter, the anxiety now a little closer to the surface. Arthur, my love, 2 months have passed. My worry is growing into a terrible, heavy thing that sits in my chest day and night. I went to your old flat on Baker Street. The landlord, a grumpy man with a pipe, said you paid your rent a month in advance and simply left. He didn't know where you'd gone. I asked after your friends from the factory, but they just shook their heads. It's as if you've vanished into thin air. Did something go wrong? Are you in trouble? My darling, I don't care about the money or the life you wanted to build. I only care for you. Please, just come home. I noticed while reading this that the ink is slightly smudged in places. On the word trouble, and again on the word home. I ran my finger over the spots, imagining a tear falling from Clara's eye, blurring the ink, mixing her sorrow into the very fabric of the page. The letters that follow, through the rest of 1947 and into 1948, trace a slow descent from anxiety into a quiet, gnawing desperation. She writes about the lonely winter, about Christmas passing without a word, about her fruitless inquiries. She even writes about Mr. Silas. I have asked everyone I can think of about your associate, Mr. Silas, she wrote in the spring of 1948. No one has ever heard of him. He is a ghost, just as you have become. Sometimes, in my darkest moments, I wonder if I invented him, if I invented this whole plan of yours just to make sense of your absence. But then I touched the silver locket you gave me, and I know it was real. You are real. Our love is real. That is the one thing I will not allow myself to doubt. The final letter from this initial, frantic period of her waiting is dated March 1948, exactly 1 year after their correspondence began. The paper is creased, as if it had been crumpled and then smoothed out again. Her handwriting, for the first time, is unsteady. 1 year, Arthur. A whole year. 365 days of waking up and hoping, and 365 nights of praying for your return. They are beginning to look at me with pity. My mother tells me I should wear the black dress, that I should mourn you and move on. But how can I mourn a man whose heart I can still feel beating in time with my own? How can I give up on the other half of my soul? I made a promise to you, but I also made one to myself. I will wait. No matter how long it takes, I will be here. Just please, give me a sign that I am not waiting for a ghost. I carefully folded the letter and placed it back in the pile. I felt an almost unbearable sadness for her. She was a ship holding fast to its anchor in the middle of a hurricane, refusing to be dashed against the rocks of despair. She couldn't know, as I did, that this was only the first year of a 50-year storm. To hold 50 years of a single person's hope in your hands is a profound and heavy experience. As I continued to sort through Clara's letters, I saw time itself begin to warp and change. The frantic, weekly letters of the first year gave way to a more measured, monthly correspondence, and then, as the 1950s bled into the 1960s, they became a ritual, penned only on anniversaries or moments of deep reflection. They were no longer letters seeking a response. They were a diary addressed to a ghost, a way to keep Arthur alive in a world that had forgotten him. October 1958. One letter began. They have put a coffee bar on the corner where the old tobacconist used to be. It is filled with young people listening to loud, American music on a jukebox. You would find it terribly exciting. I imagine you tapping your foot to the rhythm. I was promoted at the dress shop. I am now the head seamstress. The girls all call me Miss Clara. It makes me feel terribly old, but I am proud of the work. I still wear the locket every single day. It has gone from silver to a soft, warm gray, much like the city, and much like me. Tucked into that very letter was a small, black and white photograph. It showed a woman in her early 30s, standing on a windy pier. Her hair is styled in the fashion of the day, and she is wearing a smart, well-tailored coat. She is smiling, but it doesn't quite reach her eyes. There's a deep, settled sadness there, a permanent shadow. Around her neck, just visible, is the silver locket. Staring at the photograph, Clara was no longer just a name on a page. She was real. I could see the strength in her jaw, the resilience that had allowed her to keep writing these letters year after year. Her words from the 1960s and 70s chronicle a life lived in quiet parallel to the one she had lost. She writes of her parents passing away, of friends getting married and having children, of London transforming from a wounded city into a vibrant, swinging metropolis. She remains its constant, unchanging heart. April 1972, she wrote. My friend Eleanor had her first grandchild last week. A little boy. She told me again, very gently, that it is not too late for me. That there are good men in the world. I know she means well. But how do you explain that your heart is already occupied? That it has been reserved for so long that no one else would know what to do with it? They think I am lonely, Arthur. And I am. But I would be far lonelier if I had to pretend you never existed. Out of a detective's curiosity, a need to see the full shape of her life, I did something the letters couldn't tell me. I searched her name, Clara Vance, in online archives. I found her death notice, published in a local London paper in the late 1990s. The short obituary confirmed everything. Beloved sister and aunt, it read. Head seamstress at Hawthorne's for 4 to 5 years. Lived a quiet and dignified life. She never married. She never left. She stayed in the same small corner of London her entire life, as if to make herself easy to find, should he ever return. The last letter in the chest from Clara is written on thin, almost transparent email paper. The handwriting is frail, the elegant loops and lines now jagged with age. The date is March 1997. 50 years to the month since their story began. My dearest Arthur. 50 years. A lifetime. The doctor says my heart is growing tired. I think it is just weary of beating for one. I am an old woman now. The face I see in the mirror is a stranger, but the girl who loved a boy who dreamed of the sun is still here. She is just buried very deep. I don't know if I will write again. But I want you to know, wherever you are, that I never stopped loving you. I never stopped waiting. I will look for you on the other side. Find me there. It was signed, your Clara. Always. I placed the letter down, my own hands trembling slightly. This was the end of her story, the final word in a half-century monologue of love and loss. She had died a few months later, holding on to a promise to the very end. I thought this was the conclusion, the tragic, unanswered finale. I believed the sea chest had given me all of its secrets. I was wrong. There was still one more letter. One that didn't belong. It was in a modern envelope, with a recent postmark, and it was not addressed to Clara. It was addressed to the executor of her estate. And it would change everything. It's a strange thing to believe you've reached the end of a story, only to find a hidden, final chapter. After reading Clara's last letter, I had sat in silence for a long time, absorbing the profound sadness of her 50-year vigil. I had sealed the narrative in my mind. A story of a young man lost to ambition or foul play, and a woman whose unwavering love became her life's solitary purpose. The sea chest, I thought, had told its tale. But there, at the very bottom of the hidden compartment, lay the one letter that didn't fit. It was in a crisp, modern envelope, the kind you buy at a post office, not the delicate stationery of a bygone era. The postmark was from Spain, dated just last year. It was not addressed to Clara, but to the executor of the estate of Clara Vance. It had clearly been forwarded several times before ending up unanswered, eventually tucked away with the rest of her belongings and forgotten in the house clearance. This letter was an intruder, a visitor from another time. My fingers hesitated before opening it. The other letters were a closed loop, a perfect, tragic circle. This one threatened to break it. I felt like an archaeologist about to open a tomb, knowing that the rush of modern air might crumble whatever was inside. The letter was written on a computer, the text printed in a simple, clear font. The signature at the bottom, however, was written by hand, in a shaky but determined script. The letterhead read, Miguel Torres, Legal Services, Almeria, Spain. To whom it may concern, it began, the formal language a stark contrast to the passionate letters I had just read. I am writing to you on behalf of my client, who has recently passed away. For many decades, he lived in a small coastal town in the south of Spain under an assumed name. It was only upon reviewing his final effects that we discovered his true identity, along with a request that has weighed upon him for more than 50 years. His birth name was Arthur Blackwood, and he was, we believe, a resident of London until the spring of 1947. Among his possessions was a small box containing a single, unsent letter and a silver locket, identical to the one described in his final testimony. His last wish was that we make every attempt to locate a woman named Clara Vance, so that this final letter could be delivered, and the truth of his life, and his silence, could finally be known. He expressed a profound and lifelong regret, stating that his silence was not born of a lack of love, but of a deep and abiding shame. He was not the man he promised he would be, and he could not bear for her to know the man he had become. My breath caught in my throat. Arthur. He hadn't died. He hadn't been the victim of some terrible accident. He had lived a long life, just as Clara had. But he had lived it under a different name, in a different country, under the weight of a secret. The lawyer's letter continued, explaining that Arthur, or the man he became, had lived a simple, solitary life as a fisherman and had passed away peacefully at the age of 74. He never married. He never had a family. He had lived, it seemed, as a ghost of his own making. Attached to the lawyer's formal notice was another envelope, this one old and yellowed with age, its seal unbroken. On the front, in Arthur's familiar, confident script, were 2 words, for Clara. This was it, the signal he had promised, the letter that was meant to unlock their new life. It had just arrived 50 years too late. With a sense of reverence and dread, I broke the seal. The paper inside was brittle, and I unfolded it with the utmost care. The letter was dated April 1947, written just days after Arthur had disappeared from Clara's life. The ink was dark and hurried, the words tumbling over one another in their rush to be told. This was his confession, the truth that had been sealed in silence for half a century. My dearest, dearest Clara, it started. If you are reading this, then my plan has failed in the most catastrophic way imaginable. I am writing this from a small, dirty room in a port town I do not know, with the sound of a language I do not understand outside my window. I am a fool, my love. A blind, arrogant fool. There was no venture. There was no gentleman named Mr. Silas. That was a lie. Or rather, he was real, but he was no gentleman. He was a criminal, a smuggler. I met him at the docks, and he saw in me what I suppose was obvious to everyone but you, a desperate young man hungry for a shortcut. He offered me a job, a single trip. He said it was simple. I was to help crew a small boat, taking supplies, he called them delicate goods, across the channel to France. The pay was more money than I had ever seen in my life. Enough to buy us passage to Australia, to start anew, just as we dreamed. I believed him. I wanted to believe him. I saw only the end result, you and me, on a sunny shore, free from this grey life. But the moment we left the coast, I knew I had made a terrible mistake. The goods were stolen artifacts looted during the war. And Mr. Silas and his crew were not just smugglers, they were dangerous men. There was a confrontation on the boat. One of the crewmen discovered I had learned too much. He thought I was a threat. There was a fight, Clara. A terrible, violent fight. A man went overboard. They said I killed him. Perhaps I did. In the chaos, in the fear, I can't be sure of anything anymore. I only know that when we landed in France, Silas told me I could never go back. That I was a wanted man, a murderer. He gave me a handful of money and told me to disappear, or he would ensure the police found me. So I ran. I have been running ever since. I took a boat to Spain, and I have been living in the shadows, taking work where I can find it, always looking over my shoulder. How could I write to you? How could I ask you to join me in this life, a life on the run, tainted by crime and death? How could I tell the purest soul I have ever known that the man she loved was a coward and a criminal? The locket I gave you. I stole it, Clara. It was part of Silas's collection. That is the kind of man I became to try and win you the world. I am so sorry. I have destroyed our lives. My only hope is that you will forget me. That you will find a good man, an honest man who can give you the life you deserve. Please do not wait for me. My new life is a punishment, and my greatest torment is knowing I have condemned you to a life of waiting for a man who no longer exists. I love you. I will love you until my last breath. That is the only truth I have left. It was signed, yours, in deepest shame, Arthur. I folded the letter and placed it beside Clara's final words. The story was complete now, not a simple circle of love and loss, but a tangled, tragic knot of pride, fear, and regret. He had run to protect her, to preserve her image of him, and in doing so, had sentenced them both to a lifetime of lonely silence. She waited for a hero who never returned. He lived as a penitent, too ashamed to confess. They were two lovers stranded on opposite shores of the same tragedy. I gently placed all the letters, along with the locket and the photographs, back into the hidden compartment of the sea chest. The story was not mine to keep. But as I closed the lid, I knew I would carry it with me always. It's a story about how the deepest loves can be undone not by a lack of feeling, but by the weight of the secrets we keep. And how sometimes, the truth arrives just a moment too late, a final, heartbreaking echo in a house that is already empty. Holding Arthur's final, desperate confession was like holding a key to a lock I never knew existed. The entire story had been reframed. Clara's life was not a tribute to a lost hero, but a tragic consequence of a frightened man's shame. Arthur was not a ghost to be mourned, but a man who had chosen to bury himself alive, haunted by a single, catastrophic mistake. The 50-year silence wasn't a mystery. It was a self-imposed prison sentence. I spent days processing this revelation, the sea chest sitting in my study like a sarcophagus, its contents both a treasure and a terrible burden. I felt a profound sense of incompleteness. I had Clara's half of the story, a lifetime of faithful, unanswered questions. And I had the answer to those questions in Arthur's single, explosive letter. But what of the 50 years in between? What did a life built on shame and flight look like? Did Arthur's love for Clara truly survive in the Spanish sun? Or did it fade like an old photograph, bleached by guilt and time? The lawyer's letter had given me the ending, but the story of Arthur's life was a blank page. I knew I couldn't leave it there. This story had, in a way, chosen me. I felt a responsibility to see it through, to understand the full shape of their twin solitudes. So, I sat down and wrote a letter. I addressed it to Miguel Torres, the lawyer in Almeria, Spain. I explained, in careful detail, how I had come to possess the sea chest. I told him about Clara's letters, about her unwavering 50-year vigil. I described the photograph of her on the pier, the locket she never took off, and her final, heartbreaking letter where she promised to find him on the other side. I wanted him to understand that Arthur's secret had not been kept in a vacuum. It had created a ripple that defined another person's entire existence. I enclosed copies of a few of Clara's letters to prove the authenticity of my claim. I ended my letter with a simple plea. If there is anything else among his effects, a photograph, a journal, any small thing that might tell the story of his years alone, I feel it belongs with hers. Their story is unfinished, and perhaps, together, we can give it a final, coherent chapter. I posted the letter and tried to put it out of my mind, not truly expecting a reply. Weeks turned into a month. I would often find myself just looking at the sea chest, that would seeming to hold the silence of two lives. Then, one Tuesday afternoon, a package arrived. It was a sturdy cardboard mailer, covered in Spanish postage stamps. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside was a letter from Miguel Torres. "Dear friend," it began, the tone much warmer than his first formal notice. "Your letter and its enclosures reached me, and I must confess, they have occupied my thoughts ever since. The story of Clara Vance is one of the most profound testaments to love I have ever encountered. It has cast the story of my late client, Mr. Blackwood, in an entirely new and far more tragic light. Your letter prompted me to look again. I had assumed his life was as simple as it appeared. I was wrong. Tucked away in the false lining of the old suitcase he brought to Spain, I found this. It is a small, leather-bound journal. The entries are sporadic, spanning decades. He wrote in English, a secret language he kept for himself. I believe this is what you are looking for. I have taken the liberty of translating a few of the early, most poignant entries for you, to begin with. I feel, as you do, that their stories belong together." Beneath his letter was a sheaf of papers, and clipped to them, a small, worn, leather-bound book. Arthur's Journal. I opened the first translated page and began to read, finally hearing the voice from the other side of the silence. The first entry from Arthur's journal was dated only a week after his final, frantic note to Clara. It was written not in ink, but in faint, smudged pencil, the words of a man on the verge of disintegration. May 2nd, 1947. Somewhere in Spain. The sun here is a liar. It shines with such brilliance, but I feel nothing but a bone-deep cold. I have been running for 3 weeks. Every uniformed man is a threat. Every closing door sounds like a prison cell slamming shut. I wake up screaming from dreams of the sea, of the man's face as he went over the side. Did I push him? Did he fall? It all replays in my mind as a red and black blur. I am a murderer. Silas's words echo in my ears. He said it with a smile. You're one of us now, boy. Nowhere to run but away. He was right. I am no longer Arthur Blackwood, the boy who loved Clara Vance. I am just this hollow thing, this coward who runs. His pain was so raw it felt like a physical presence in the room. I found myself instinctively reaching for Clara's letters from that same period. While she was anxiously but hopefully writing about saving his seat at the pub, he was writing this. The tragic disconnect was staggering. His next entry, a month later, was a direct address to her. The journal was not just a record. It was his only outlet for the love he could no longer express. June 12, 1947. I saw a woman today at the market. She had your hair, the same dark chestnut that catches the light. For a single, breathtaking moment, I thought it was you. My heart stopped. I almost called out your name. But then she turned, and she was a stranger. The disappointment was so sharp, so absolute, it nearly brought me to my knees. I had to lean against a wall just to breathe. It is a special kind of hell, Clara, to search for the face of the only person you love in a crowd of strangers, knowing you are the reason she is not here. I am so sorry. I whisper it to the sea every night, but the waves just throw the words back at me. His early years in Spain, as detailed in the journal, were a litany of hardship and self-flagellation. He worked odd jobs on farms and docks, always for cash, always keeping his head down. He slept in barns and cheap boarding houses, haunted and gaunt. He was punishing himself, living a life of penance that was a dark mirror to Clara's life of faithful waiting. She denied herself happiness out of love for him. He denied himself happiness out of shame before her. A final entry from this early period, dated March 1949, on the 2-year anniversary of his first letter to her from London, showed the depth of his despair. 2 years. Is it possible? It feels like a century. I wonder if you have forgotten me yet. I pray that you have. I pray some good, honest man has seen the light in you and is cherishing it. The thought of it is a knife in my gut, but it is better than the alternative, the thought of you, waiting. Waiting for a man who is a ghost, a story that ended in a lie. Tonight, I will walk to the cliffs and I will say your name one last time. Clara, the most beautiful word I have ever known. It means clear, bright. Everything I am not. Please, my love, forget me. Let me be the only one who is haunted. I put the translated pages down, my heart aching for them both. 2 people, locked in their own private prisons, separated by a sea but bound by a love that had become a source of both torment and salvation. He was praying for her to forget him, while she was writing letters promising to always remember. It was the cruelest, most perfect tragedy, and I was now its sole witness. The world spun on, leaving Clara and Arthur suspended in the amber of their shared tragedy. The 1950s gave way to the 1960s, and London, a city shaking off its post-war gloom, exploded into a kaleidoscope of color, music, and social revolution. But in Clara's small corner of it, time moved differently. Her letters from this period, which I now read alongside Arthur's journal, paint a picture of a woman creating a life not of passion, but of purpose. She found a quiet dignity in her work, her skill with a needle and thread becoming a small but significant form of artistry. In a letter from the summer of 1966, she describes the changing fashions with a detached amusement, like a botanist observing the changing seasons. Dearest Arthur, London has become a city I barely recognize. The skirts are shockingly short, the colors are blinding, and the music from the shops on Carnaby Street is a constant, thumping beat. The girls at the workshop are all abuzz with it. They speak of freedom and breaking rules. I suppose we were rule breakers once, too, weren't we? Whispering about running away to a sunnier world. It feels like another lifetime. I find my peace not in the new, but in the old. In the hum of my sewing machine, in the familiar weight of the locket against my skin. These things are constant. They are real. In a world that is shouting, I find I prefer to listen to the silence. It is where I still find you. While Clara was finding solace in consistency, Arthur, in his self-imposed exile, was fighting a different battle. His journal from the same year reveals a man teetering on the edge of oblivion, saved not by purpose, but by a simple, unexpected act of human kindness. The entry is longer than his earlier ones, more reflective, written by a man who has stared into the abyss. July 1966. For almost 20 years, I have been a shadow. I have lived on the scraps of life, telling myself it is what I deserve. This past winter was the hardest. The work was scarce, the nights were cold, and the ghosts were louder than ever. I had saved enough for a bottle of cheap brandy, and I walked to the cliffs with the intention of drinking it until I found the courage to finally meet the man I sent to the bottom of the sea. But as I sat there, an old fisherman named Matteo, who sometimes throws me a day's work, found me. He didn't ask what I was doing. He just sat beside me, sharing his bread and cheese, and began to speak of his wife, who had passed the year before. He spoke of her with such love, such simple, profound grief. He said, "The body dies, but the story, it continues." We sat in silence for an hour as the sun went down. He saved my life, though he will never know it. He reminded me that even a haunted man has a story, and it is his duty to see it to the end. I poured the brandy onto the rocks and walked back. I still believe I deserve nothing, but perhaps I can endure this life with a little more grace. This entry marked a turning point for Arthur. The frantic guilt began to recede, replaced by a deep, melancholic resignation. He stopped running and settled permanently in the small fishing village of Agua Amarga. He learned Spanish, bought a small, broken-down boat with his meager savings, and began to fish. He was no longer Arthur Blackwood, the fugitive, but Ricardo, the quiet Englishman who kept to himself. He was building a life, of sorts. A life of penance, lived out under the relentless Spanish sun, the very sun he had once promised to Clara. He was living their dream, but he was living it as a nightmare, utterly and completely alone. The 1970s found both Clara and Arthur entering middle age, their youth now a distant country they could no longer visit. The sharp edges of their personal tragedies had been worn smooth by the relentless passage of time, leaving a permanent ache where passion once resided. I read Clara's letter from 1972, the one where she speaks of her friend becoming a grandmother, and I felt the full weight of the life she had foregone. Her acceptance was so complete, so devoid of bitterness, that it was all the more heartbreaking. She had built a fortress of solitude around her heart, and the locket was its sole, treasured relic. Arthur's journal from that same year reflects the same quiet sense of a life unlived, a path not taken. He had become a fixture in his small village, respected for his hard work and his silence. But his isolation was absolute. September 1972. A young couple from Madrid has been renting the cottage down the lane for the summer. I see them walking on the beach in the evenings, hand in hand, their laughter carrying on the breeze. He looks at her with such open adoration, without a shadow of shame in his eyes. She leans her head on his shoulder with a trust that is so complete, it is like a prayer. They are a vision of what we were supposed to be, Clara. I see them, and I feel a hollow space open up inside me so vast and so deep I fear I will fall into it. I am 48 years old. My face is lined from the sun and my hands are calloused from the ropes and nets. I have lived more of my life as Ricardo than I ever did as Arthur. But tonight, watching them, I am just that boy in London again, dreaming of a future I single-handedly destroyed. Does your heart ever ache with the ghost of a life we should have had? This parallel yearning, this shared ache across a continent, was the invisible thread that still connected them. They were like two clocks, stopped at the exact same moment in 1947, even as the world around them ticked on. He would watch the sea, and she would watch the grey London rain, and both were seeing the same thing, the face of the one they had lost. Among the translated pages from the lawyer, there was another small artifact. A photograph, taken sometime in the late 1970s. It was a candid shot, likely taken by a fellow villager. It showed Arthur, Ricardo, mending a fishing net by his boat. He is weathered, his face a mask of solitude, but he is looking out towards the sea with an expression of such profound, unending longing that it transcended the grainy black and white image. It was the same look I had seen in Clara's eyes in her photograph on the pier. They had grown to look like each other in their loneliness. Two halves of a single, broken locket, separated by a lifetime of regret. The 1980s arrived, a decade of sharp edges, loud ambition, and technological marvels that must have seemed like science fiction to someone like Clara. London was a city of finance and fashion, of royal weddings and social unrest. For Clara, now in her 60s and nearing retirement, it was a world she observed from behind a window, a spectacle that no longer concerned her. Her letters from this time, less frequent but rich with introspection, show a woman who had fully retreated into the gentle landscape of her memories. The paper she writes on is different now. It's no longer the fine, cream-colored stationery of her youth, but simple, lined paper from a notepad. Her elegant script, while still clear, has a slight tremor, the first hint of the frailty of age. In a letter dated from the autumn of 1985, she doesn't speak of the present, but travels back 40 years to a single, perfect day. My dearest Arthur, it was a strange and golden afternoon today, the kind of autumn light that makes everything look soft and sad. It reminded me of that Sunday we took the train to Hampstead Heath. Do you remember? It had rained all week, but that morning the sun came out as if just for us. You packed a flask of tea and 2 stale scones you'd saved from your rations, and you presented them to me on a borrowed blanket as if it were a royal banquet. You were so handsome in that worn coat of yours. We lay on the grass for hours, watching the clouds, and you told me about all the books you were going to write. You weren't Arthur from the factory that day. You were a poet, a dreamer. You pointed to a cloud that you said looked like a map of Australia, our future home. I still see it sometimes. That cloud. That perfect, hopeful shape in the sky. It is strange how a single day can be enough to feed a heart for a lifetime. It has been enough for me. As the narrator, reading these words felt like an intrusion into a sacred space. This was the core of her faith. Her love was no longer for the man himself, who was by now a complete unknown, but for the memory of the boy who showed her a map in the clouds. While the city outside her window changed beyond recognition, she remained in that single, sunlit moment on Hampstead Heath. I found, tucked into the pages of this letter, a small, faded newspaper clipping. It was her retirement notice from Hawthorne's dress shop. After 45 years of dedicated service, it read, "We bid a fond farewell to our head seamstress, Miss Clara Vance. 4 to 5 years. Her entire adult life spent in one place, just as her heart had been. She was a master of constancy in a world obsessed with change. She had become a living monument to a love that the world had long since forgotten, a quiet sentinel guarding a memory that only she could see." Across the sea, in the timeless, sun-bleached village, Arthur was also growing old. The villagers now called him Viejo Ricardo, Old Ricardo. He was a part of the landscape, a fixture like the gnarled olive trees or the salt-eroded cliffs. His journal entries from the 1980s are scarce, sometimes with years passing between them. The frantic guilt had long since calcified into a quiet, permanent sorrow. He had served his time in the prison of his own making. But the past was a sleeping beast, not a dead one. An entry from 1986 shows how easily it could be woken. A young English couple passed through the village today. Backpackers. The boy had a camera and a cheerful, guileless face. He tried to speak to me in broken Spanish, asking about the best place to swim. I answered in short, guttural phrases, my head down, mending my net. But then the girl said something to him in English. The sound of it, so clear and familiar, was like a jolt of electricity. I looked up by instinct. She smiled at me. For a terrifying second, I was no longer Ricardo, the fisherman. I was Arthur Blackwood, a 20-year-old boy in a foreign land. The old fear, cold and sharp, seized me. I turned away abruptly, mumbling an excuse, and practically fled back to my small house. I locked the door and did not come out until after they had gone. The encounter, so trivial to the young tourists, had shaken him to his core. Later that night, he wrote about the fortress he had built around himself. I have lived as Ricardo for so long that I almost believe it myself. He is a simple man. He wakes with the sun, he works the sea, he sleeps without dreaming. He is safe. But Arthur is the ghost that lives inside him. He is the one who carries the shame, the one who remembers the fight, the one whose heart is buried in London. Today, for a moment, the ghost almost broke free. I realized tonight that I have not just been hiding from the law. I have been hiding from him, from the foolish, dreaming boy who destroyed everything. It was after this entry that he mentions, for the first time in detail, the other locket, the one he had stolen and kept. It is my penance and my only comfort, the twin to the one she wears. I have kept it in a small wooden box for almost 40 years. I have never opened it. I cannot bear to see the empty spaces inside where our faces should be. On the anniversary of the day I left, I take the box out. I do not open it. I just hold it. I try to send a thought across the sea, a silent apology. It is a foolish, sentimental ritual for an old man. But it is all I have left of the boy I was, and the love I threw away. And so they lived, two solitary keepers of a single flame. She, tending to the bright, warm memory of their love. He, guarding the dark, cold secret of its loss. They were separated by 1,000 miles of water, but in their shared, silent rituals, in their twin lockets, they had never been further apart, nor more intimately connected. The 1990s marked the final, quiet chapter of their lives. The world was hurtling forward into a new digital age, a reality of computers and instant communication that was utterly alien to the world of handwritten letters and 50-year silences. For both Clara and Arthur, now in their 70s, life had become a process of looking backward, of taking inventory of a life defined by a single, seismic event. Clara's last letter, which I now recognized as her final conscious goodbye, was dated March 1997. 50 years. Reading it again, knowing what I now knew of Arthur's life, it became something more than a testament to her love. It was an act of profound, unwavering faith in the boy she remembered. My dearest Arthur. 50 years. A lifetime. The doctor says my heart is growing tired. I think it is just weary of beating for one. I am an old woman now. The face I see in the mirror is a stranger, but the girl who loved a boy who dreamed of the sun is still here. I don't know if I will write again, but I want you to know, wherever you are, that I never stopped loving you. I never stopped waiting. I will look for you on the other side. Find me there. She passed away a few months later, in the autumn of that same year. She died never knowing the truth, but also, perhaps, never having her perfect memory of him tarnished. She loved the boy who dreamed of maps in the clouds until her very last breath. Across the sea, Arthur was also facing his own mortality. His journal, which Mr. Torres had sent me in its entirety, contained one final, powerful entry from the summer of 1997. He knew his time was coming to an end. His heart, like Clara's, was growing tired. The entry is not a reflection, but a resolution. It is the moment he finally decided to break his silence. August 1997. The doctor here, a good man, has told me I do not have much time left. It is a strange sort of peace to know the end is near. My life has been a long atonement, but I know now that my silence was a selfish act. I thought I was protecting her, but I was only protecting myself from the shame of her seeing me as I truly was. I have lived and will die as Ricardo, a fiction. But Arthur Blackwood owes one final debt. He owes Clara Vance the truth. I will write it all down. A full confession. I will instruct my lawyer, Mr. Torres, to make every effort to find her upon my death and deliver it. It is the only honest thing I will have done in 50 years. The truth deserves to be known, even if the man who hid it for a lifetime does not deserve to be forgiven. And he did. That final, sealed letter to Clara was his life's true final act. He died in October 1997, just 2 months after writing it, and only a month after Clara herself had passed. They had left the world within weeks of each other, like two candles that had been burning in separate rooms, finally flickering out at the same time. His final reach for her in this life had missed her by a breath, leaving her to wait for him in the next, just as she had promised. With all the letters and journals spread before me, I was the sole custodian of their complete, heartbreaking story. I was the only person on earth who knew that Clara's 50 years of waiting had not been in vain for a love that was forgotten, but was a vigil for a love that was secretly, painfully reciprocated. I held her lifetime of outbound messages and his lifetime of unsent replies. My small study had become the improbable meeting point for two souls who had never found their way back to each other. I reread the final letter from the Spanish lawyer, Miguel Torres. It provided the last, somber details. Mr. Blackwood, known to us as Ricardo, passed peacefully in his sleep, he wrote. As per his wishes, he was buried in the small municipal cemetery here in Aguirre Amarga. It is a simple place, overlooking the sea he worked for most of his life. The grave is marked with the name he chose, Ricardo Fuentes. He left almost nothing of value behind, save for the story you now know. The story. That was his entire estate. Not money or property, but the weight of his secret, which he had finally bequeathed to the world, hoping it would find its way to her. And it had, in a way. It had found its way to me. The responsibility of it felt immense. The sea chest was no longer just a collection of artifacts. It was a reliquary. It held the sacred objects of their love, the lockets, the photos, the paper-thin vessels of their hope and their pain. To simply close the lid and put it away felt like a betrayal. It felt like leaving them lost and separated all over again. Clara had died believing Arthur was a mystery. Arthur had died believing Clara would learn he was a coward. But I knew the truth that lay between those two poles. That they were two profoundly human people, flawed and frightened, who had loved each other with a constancy that defied logic, time, and even reason. Their tragedy was not that their love died, but that it had been forced to live in silence. I knew then that I had one final role to play in their story. I could not reunite them in life, but I could, perhaps, provide a final, symbolic meeting place for their memory. My first journey was to London. I found the cemetery in a quiet, leafy suburb, a place of old stones and sleeping histories. After a short search, I found her grave. The headstone was simple and elegant, much like her handwriting, Clara Vance. 1926 to 1997. Beloved sister and aunt. There were no words of love, no mention of a partner. It was the grave of a woman the world saw as having lived her life alone. I knelt down and cleared away a few stray leaves from the inscription. From my pocket, I took a small, linen pouch. Before my trip, I had written to Mr. Torres one last time, with a strange request. He had kindly obliged. I opened the pouch and poured a small amount of coarse, pale sand onto the earth of her grave. It was sand from the beach at Aguirre Amarga. I then placed a single, sun-bleached seashell beside her name. It was a small, almost nonsensical gesture, but it felt right. I was bringing a piece of his shore to hers. He never forgot you, Clara, I whispered to the quiet stone. He was just lost. And he was so sorry. 2 weeks later, I was on a plane to Spain. Aguirre Amarga was just as I had imagined it from Arthur's descriptions. A cluster of whitewashed houses huddled against a turquoise sea, a place that felt protected from the rush of the modern world. I found the cemetery on a hill overlooking the village. It was a simple, windswept place. I found his grave easily, a plain wooden cross marked with a single name, Ricardo Fuentes. From my coat, I took the final relic. It was the tarnished silver locket from the sea chest, Clara's locket. The one she had worn for 50 years. Before I left, I had carefully opened it and placed the tiny black and white photograph of her, the one from the PO in the 1950s, inside one of the frames. I left the other side empty. It was the space for the man he should have been, the Arthur she had loved. With a steady hand, I looped the delicate chain around the top of the wooden cross. The small silver heart hung there, glinting in the Spanish sun. For the first time in 50 years, Clara was with him. Her image would now watch over the same sea that he had watched for a lifetime, looking for her. I stood there for a long time, the wind from the Mediterranean on my face. The sea that had been the backdrop to his exile, the barrier that had kept them apart. But I knew now the water had never been the true obstacle. The real chasm had been carved from shame, fear, and a single, tragic choice. Theirs was not a happy story, but it was a real one. It was a testament to the fact that love, in its purest form, can survive anything except the silence we choose to impose on it. As I walked away, leaving the locket to keep its silent vigil, I felt the weight lift from my shoulders. The story was no longer just mine to carry. It was finally, and forever, theirs. reunited not in life, but in the quiet, enduring narrative of their unbroken, tragic, and undeniable love. And so, a small silver locket hangs on a wooden cross, overlooking a Spanish sea. A final, silent meeting of two souls who spent a lifetime apart. Arthur and Clara's story is a powerful and somber reminder of how a single moment, a single choice born of fear and shame, can cast a shadow over an entire lifetime. Their tragedy, in the end, was not a lack of love. They had an abundance of that. Their tragedy was a lack of words. It's a monument to the devastating power of silence. Perhaps the greatest lesson their story leaves with us is this: the truth, no matter how difficult or painful, is a bridge. It allows for understanding, for forgiveness, for connection. But silence, especially when we use it to hide our own flaws from those we love, is always a cage. The words we are too afraid to say often become the heaviest burdens we carry, for ourselves and for those who wait for us. Thank you so much for joining me on this long and emotional journey, for listening to the quiet voices of Arthur and Clara, and for giving their story your time and your heart. I would be truly moved to read your own reflections in the comments below. What part of their story will stay with you the most? Do you see it as a story of hope or one of regret? And perhaps, in some way, their story echoes something you have seen or felt in your own life. If you have ever witnessed the profound impact of unspoken words or a long-held secret, I invite you to share your thoughts. These stories are what connect us, reminding us that we are not alone in our most human experiences of love, loss, and longing. If you believe that stories like this deserve to be found and shared, and you wish to join us in uncovering more memories on paper, please consider subscribing to the channel.